Like to call the work session in order for July 1st, 2024. City Clerk, please read the roll call.
Let the record reflect that all members are present.
Thank you. We have one item on the agenda tonight. Would like to remind council that staff will be pausing every so often to answer any questions. First item is final plat development services. Wait a minute. Katie Wilkins, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Katie Wilkin, Development Services Director. I am before you to talk about potential changes to the final plat process. This discussion tonight is in support of our strategic plan goal to evaluate processes to streamline the development timeline. So the first thing I wanted to do is talk a little bit about the development timeline. Really, the entire plan review process can get distilled to 4 steps. No matter what you're building in the community or any community, there's 4 basic steps that a project will have to go through. The first is the general plan, and what the general plan does is set the vision and the high-level policy about how we want to grow and develop as a community. The next step is rezoning, which is where we set the standards. What are the building setbacks? What building heights allowed? What kind of uses are permitted? Next is preliminary planning, where we're able to look at the different pieces together. The standards have already been set at this point, but we're just taking a preliminary look and usually seeing how things fit together. We want to make sure there's not a building being built over on top of a water line. We coordinate with our other departments in the city, and we coordinate with outside agencies such as Luke Air Force Base and school districts. Finally is the final plan, and staff is simply looking through the final plan, which is the actual construction plans of what will be built and making sure it meets standards. So through this development process, the 2 major steps that have public review is the general plan and the rezoning. And as council is well aware, the general plan has a direct voice from our citizens. Just 2 months ago, our new general plan was ratified by the voters by 75% of the vote. And then in the rezoning, people also have a voice. First of all, council is the one who makes decisions regarding what our standards are that the city staff will use to review our developments. But of course, we make zoning decisions in public hearing. So any resident or member of the community has an opportunity to come and have their voice heard about a development. So if we look at this example with the single-family residential platting process, the general plan would tell us where do we want to see residential neighborhoods located? While rezoning, before you are some examples of exhibits that might come before you with a rezoning case, where we can generally see what is the planned layout of a subdivision. This image in the middle is the planned circulation, and the image on the right are the amenities and parks plan for that neighborhood. So during the rezoning process, City Council and our community have an opportunity to have their voice heard of how our developments are designed. And council can make decisions on changes to the development standards as they see fit. Whereas the final plat process and the pictures before you are a couple example slides from an actual final plat is a very detailed document that we're simply making sure it meets the standards. When we get to final plat process, and we bring it to City Council, we can't make changes if the plat meets the standards. So then I think the question might be, if that's the case and City Council doesn't have the authority to make changes to final plats, then why are they coming to City Council? And the simple answer is state law has required it. There are certain types of plots that have been administrative, and for Goodyear, we call those minor land divisions. If there's 3 or fewer lots being created, staff has handled those. So there are certain types of plots staff has been reviewing over these years, but most plats were required to come to City Council for action and approval. The roadway dedications were also required to be adopted by City Council. However, last year, there was a change in state law. The legislature passed SB 1103, which gave city councils the authority to allow staff to review and approve final plats if council so wishes. After that, the League of Cities created a model ordinance, which also recommended an administrative process for all final plats, or almost all final plats. And since then, the City of Phoenix and Town of Crane Creek have both changed their final plat processes, so they both are doing fully administrative final plat processes. There are also, we've contacted other cities in the valley, and most cities are underway in having discussions with their council, such as we are tonight, Queen Creek and Phoenix are the only two that have adopted changes to their ordinance as of this time. So currently, final plats have been going to council on the consent agenda, and in the last year and a half, there haven't been any final plats removed from the consent agenda by either city council or the public, and there have been no changes to the staff recommended stipulations. If council did want to give us direction to change the plat process, it would require change to the city code. Chapter 15 is the subdivision regulations, which regulates the platting process. I also just want to give council a reminder that there is an item in the strategic plan for next fiscal year to update the zoning ordinance. So if there are changes council wants to see in our design standards, in our setbacks, in how we regulate the look and feel of our neighborhoods, we're going to be having those discussions with you soon when that project launches early next year. So we will have the opportunity to look at that, and we don't necessarily need to rely on the final plat process to do that work. So staff does recommend that council direct staff to change the process to an administrative process. If you were to give us that direction tonight, we would do outreach to our development community this summer. I can tell you we've already gotten a lot of questions from our customers on when are we going to change our plat process. So I do know that there's a lot of interest in changes to the platting process from our development community. But of course, when we get into the details of exactly how the ordinance would look, definitely our customers would want to have an opportunity to review those draft ordinances and look at what we're proposing before we bring it before you. So we would do that work this summer, and then our hope would be to bring a city code amendment to you for discussion, hopefully as soon as possible. We'd aim for September, just after council break. That concludes my presentation, so I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions? Go ahead.
Just so if the public's hearing this, there's still those first two steps that you outlined, that there is public input and public say. This does not take out those steps at all. I just want to be clear so that people hear that.
Thank you, council member. Absolutely. The public has the opportunity to provide input on specific projects through the rezoning process, which is the time when council has the ability to change the codes or give staff direction on how to implement the project.
Well, thank you. I think it would speed things up immensely, so thank you.
Let's see, Councilmember Campbell.
My question, Katie, is what was the position of our city regarding this bill as it worked itself through the House?
Thank you, council member. I believe we were in support of it. As you know, that there's been a lot of discussion about our processes and zoning processes at the state legislature, so we're always looking for those compromise bills. And this was a really good one because it wasn't authoritative in telling us what we had to do. It simply gives city council the ability to look at these processes and direct staff to change them.
And if we do decide to do that, what does it mean to the developer and what does it mean in their timeline?
Thank you. I believe it'll save at least a couple months on the final plat process for this. And then, of course, it does save them time. They don't have to come down to the city council meetings. They're typically paying a zoning attorney to come in case there is a question that comes up. So there is definitely a money savings and time savings in the development process.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Stipp.
Thank you, Katie. I just want to kind of follow up on what Councilmember Loretano had asked. Can you go back like to your timeline slide? That'll work. Where in this process does the city council get to weigh in?
Thank you. City council adopts the general plan, so that high-level vision. But when we're talking about individual developments, rezoning is when city council weighs
So
in.
if a parcel is already zoned for X, we will never see that here under this new suggested timeline.
Thank you. If somebody is working under their current zoning, you might not see it then if they don't need to come to council to change their standards.
So is that consistent today? So how does this change? How does this change impact what we do today versus what we'll do 6 months from now if this changes?
If this changes, that's the way it is today, but city council does see the final plat today, but city council doesn't have the authority to make changes to the design of the final plat as long as it meets the standards that are already on the book. So even though you're seeing it and you're required to act on it, it does give the perception that council has the authority to make changes, but really you don't, because if it meets the standards, it needs to be adopted per standard. So there could be developments that come through where council didn't see it ahead of time, but you weren't able to make changes to it anyway.
Okay, so a new parcel, 500 acres, wants to develop residential. Do we see that? We don't see that at all then?
Possibly not. If they are already zoned for a particular use.
It's already residential?
It's already residential, then council might not see it.
So in the past, we have seen those preliminary plats, though, and we've been able to say, hey, we want more open space, we want more.
You saw preliminary plats. We made a change to the preliminary plat process, I believe, 3 years ago, and that's similar, that at preliminary plat, you're also not supposed to be making changes to regulations. Zoning is the time we establish standards, so it's really only zoning
Okay.
that anyone has the opportunity to say there should be more open space, or the building should be shorter, or there should be more trees.
So, and the reason that I've been asking the questions this way is that to illustrate for anyone who's listening to this is, unless it's in the design guideline, unless it's in the ordinance, we can't really alter what's going, what's not going, because these are already prescribed by what is in the ordinances.
That is correct.
Okay. So I think your comment about the perception that we have the ability to make changes is a really good observation. That while it appears as though we have some magic wand ability, we honestly don't have the power to energize that magic wand to make things better or make things different. And right now, what we're talking about is making the change to the final plan, the final plat process.
Correct.
So, which is very administrative at this point. It comes to us, it hits the agenda, we go on and off we go. So I think what we're learning through these past probably couple of years is what do we need to be able to influence the things that we can, and I think we want to continue to see those as a council. And I think when this comes back to us with the larger, I think maybe a better picture of how that looks, where can we pull strings and where can we not? I think having that for the public to see. And it's also a good reminder for us. I think by then we'll have identified perhaps new council members by then, so it will be good for them to hear it as well. And kind of laying out for the public where we can and cannot influence the various projects. I think the greatest frustration we have on council is we get frequent emails about, you should put this here, you should put that there. And I realize I'm preaching to the choir, but we don't have the ability to decide. Whatever the landowner wants to put there is what the landowner is essentially entitled to put there. So I think kind of spelling that out will be really important. So I appreciate the process. I'm okay with moving forward with this going to an administrative action. I think we've taken these steps in the last few years to speed up some of our other components. I know we've had a great deal of pressure from the legislature to get our processes to be even faster, and this is, I think, a result of that. So thanks for doing it.
Vice Mayor?
I want to thank my fellow council members. They've asked really good, insightful questions about the process. I was trying to recall in the tenure that I've been here, 6 years, have we ever pulled a preliminary or final? And I don't recall. Now I find out we really can't. So I guess that explains it. I concur with your staff recommendation and also look forward to the conversation about the zoning ordinance.
Great discussion. I don't see any other discussion points up here, except to say that unfortunately, once you put the preliminary plat, the final plat really is an extra 2 months for what? You know, what I mean, I think it's important to streamline the process, and the rezoning is what I tell people when I'm out there. If you got an issue, rezoning is where you want to make the move, you know, and all of our other things that have been adopted is pretty much what we can't kind of go against. So I have no problem with a streamline on that. So again, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
All right, with that, there be no further business to discuss. This meeting is adjourned. We'll move right into the video for the regular council meeting.